Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. The Disruptance Podcast is the show that disrupts the way entrepreneurs think to make them more profitable and impactful. Rethink tired and outdated business norms to welcome innovation and unlock your unlimited possibilities. Here are your hosts, Forney and Greg Fowler.
So Eric, super excited about this one, man. Just diving into it as always. And, there's a couple thought processes that come into mind. And I know you and I were having a dialogue, prior to jumping into this episode. And your thought and your mind on weight loss and real estate. What was the conversation like for the audience out there? Let's dive a little bit deep into that topic. Controversial, maybe. So let's go.
It's funny. I don't know why someone wouldn't think weight loss and real estate and just marry them together, right? They seem like topics that go hand in hand. But it's interesting. I'll give you a little bit of the backstory and kind of like how I got to this, which was, Gary Keller had a physician out to an event, and this guy by the name of Lane Norton, and Lane came on, and one of the things I love about his content is it's very like concentric thinking. He brings a lot of research, a lot of studies to his perspective, and it just so happened I was listening to a video that he had about some meta-analysis around weight loss. And what stuck out to me was 95% of people who lose weight regain it within 3 years. And many of them gain significantly more than the weight that they lost. So fewer than 5% of people who lose weight are able to sustain that weight loss after 3 years. And what they found was that in triangulating kind of all these, multiple hundreds of studies around people who sustain weight loss, what they found were there were these principles that were tried and true. And it wasn't whether it was like vegan or keto or, whether it was whatever the Atkins diet's called today or whatever Ginny Craig and Weight Watchers are. Instead, it was actually these like fundamental pillars that if the more pillars you had, the more successful you were at increasing the likelihood that you maintained the weight loss after a 3-year period. And so as I'm listening to these similarities across a few hundred studies, what I found was these are actually the same principles that hold up in running a real estate sales company or that show up in running a service-based business. If you're an entrepreneur, the same things that show up in sustaining weight loss are the same things required to be present inside of a service-based business, especially for salespeople to be consistently effective. And so I just thought maybe this is actually just a hack for doing anything behavior-wise successfully and maintaining that behavior over a consistent duration. And so just kind of going down the rabbit hole of trying to understand some of that more led me to this standpoint that behavior and the adaptation of behavior is actually based more on principle and less on the trendy, diet or the trendy tool or the new technology or the new way of doing something. Instead, it's on time tested and sustainable ways of behaving. And so I thought, we'll bring some nerd to it and share the perspective of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's great though, Eric. And as we were bringing that kind of full circle for the audience, they're probably thinking, what the heck are they talking about? Atkins and Jenny Craig and what's going on? Trust me, everybody, Eric is going to bring this home with the very specific principles. And I love that you're doing correlation between that and to business and entrepreneurialism. So let's dive into that, Eric. What are the thoughts of the takeaways to the kind of, as we pre-discussed, what is it, 9 factors kind of precursor to that?
So one of them was self-monitoring.
Okay.
And so when you think about the kind of the correlation of self-monitoring from a health standpoint, you can think about, you've got mine's on the charger, but you've got, your Apple Watch that's tracking your heart rate, your caloric burn today, the steps that you take, maybe the exercise that you performed. You've got, an app that's measuring the calories that you consume if you keep a diet log or if you take photos. You got all these ways of doing self-monitoring around what you eat. Well, as a salesperson or as a business owner, you also need to apply the fundamental principles of self-monitoring. So for real estate agents, for content creators like yourself, Greg, for the people that you coach and consult, they need to be monitoring their activities, the ones that are the leading indicator behaviors that roll up to the desired result. Keep a log of those. And that self-monitoring is what's not important is the mechanism of monitoring. What's most important is that you monitor and have a relationship with the metrics that are being monitored. As in, how often am I going back and am I revisiting the number of steps that I took on the watch compared to my goal that I set for how many steps I said I was going to walk today? Or how many posts did I make on social media? How many impressions did I have? Whatever the monitoring metric is, I have to self-monitor, and then I have to have a relationship with that specific metric itself. But that's one component of it. It's not the only component to make someone successful.
And I love that your variation into that, builds off of every aspect of life. And I think that taking it to the digital side, looking at KPIs or key performance indicators, as you're mentioning there, you can't just monitor and evaluate data, and you can data mine all day long. What do you do with that data? How do you reposition or further double or triple down on what's working and what's not to reevaluate? You're talking about fitness, for example, what's working for your health and wellness and what's not, and reevaluating and adjusting. So I guess let's go down that road too, Eric. Is that diving into additional principles? I mean, applied knowledge, right? That's kind of where we're getting at.
Absolutely. And so one of the other components that I think is really important, and especially when I think about the application in the service-based business, is that you have visual reminders, and that you also then have a plan in advance for what your activities are going to be. And then you also pre-plan for when you fail. How will you get back on the wagon? Right? If you think about this, Greg, and especially it's easy to understand from the health standpoint, is that when you fail to go to the gym or you eat too much at Thanksgiving, the mistake that many people will make is that they never get started again, or they go significant weeks in a row before they get restarted. If you pre-plan a failure or an emergency evacuation plan for how you'll get restarted, if and when there's something that knocks you off track, it gives you the ability to know exactly where to pick up where you left off, because you've pre-decided how you'll remedy the failure. Because what's most important is progress, not perfection.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful statement.
And so I thought it was interesting that the most successful diet studies show that there were visual reminders to add to that self-monitoring with a defined relapse plan, and then pre-planning for both meals and for like events, like when I go out to lunch, when I go to dinner, when I have holidays. I'm going to pre-decide what choices I will make when it's more difficult to make the right choices. And so to me, in a business, you go, I'm going to decide the day before what's most important so that I can do those activities tomorrow when the world comes and brings its hell and fury and chaos the next day, or dentist appointments like mine today, right? When it brings me all of those things, I'm going to decide what's most important tomorrow in advance. And so I thought it was an interesting way of also seeing the success correlation. And then one of the others was external monitoring.
Okay.
And so it shows up in the dietary research and the weight loss research as support groups, peer feedback, and primary care physician feedback. And so I think about that as, if you're a leader, it is my job to show up and provide the community support and the feedback for the people in the organization. And most commonly, I'm going to do that in a one-on-one, or most commonly, I'm going to do that in a small group. But it still is my fiduciary responsibility as a leader to provide the environment of external monitoring so that it reinforces the internal monitoring to get multiplying results. So I don't get to abdicate my responsibilities as a leader. I still have to play a role if I want the people around me to be successful in providing them with external monitoring.
I love that from a leadership standpoint too, Eric, as you mentioned, because so many people are, thinking of themselves as entrepreneurs. Oh, I'm not a leader. I don't have a massive team, an organization that I'm running, but everyone is a leader in some standpoint to their friends, their family, or their local community, even a leader of yourself and your activities that you're doing. You'd mentioned something that was very direct into being more so in the lines of proactive and not reactive, and planning ahead to execute at a high level. And it's kind of that old adage, fail to plan, plan to fail. And I think that resonates with the audience directly, from a real estate standpoint, very deeply, because it happens all the time. I mean, there's a lot of flying by the seat of the pants and riding the waves of any given market. The true professionals that have been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, such as yourself, you plan, you execute, you really do it at a high level. And there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just by luck or chance. So I love where you're going.
No. So, one of the other things then, Greg, is as you kind of keep working down this study is that they found the most successful at sustaining weight loss had encouraging experiences. And that sounds silly. Because you should go, well, yeah, no shit. Except that it's really easy in a business to oftentimes focus on the things that are that where we fall short of our goals, or where someone else in the organization falls short of what they said they would do. And yet it still is our job as leaders then to bring the encouraging environment in, because what we have to do is foster a new identity for people who aim to be successful or who aim to create improved results. And so when you think about someone who's losing weight, they have to absorb that new identity. And that identity is so important. In fact, you could make a really strong argument that that identity is arguably the thing that we all fight so hard to stay in alignment of, is our own perception of who we believe we are.
Wow.
Is we try so hard to maintain integrity with our own identity. And so as a leader, it's our job to help shape the identity of the organization. And there's a lot of ways tactically to be able to do that. But that's one of the challenges. In fact, as a parent, we work hard and strategically to shape the identity of our child. And what I mean by that is take the political PC wokeness out of identity and look at it from the standpoint of, like, it's my job to project onto him that you're a good leader, you're kind, that you are responsible, that you're a good friend. All of these character traits we try to remind and craft that identity so that Hudson models those behaviors as who he is long term. Same thing applies when you're thinking about how you run an organization. Is you create that identity for the people in the company.
And I love that you're bringing the parenthood nature into that, because so many people in the audience are parents themselves, and understand kind of the importance of shaping and giving projection to leadership from that standpoint. But that transcends into everything that we do. Something that stood out to me, Eric, that you're mentioning, is kind of looking at it from an identity standpoint. For me, one of the big takeaways is looking at it from a maintained standpoint of be the authentic version of yourself. I think that when too many people overreach or overstep into the personality that they're trying to become, or the people that they're trying to impress or project a certain environment to, I think that's when the waters get muddied. So ultimately, I think having a level of authenticity in everything that we do, and just showing up as you show up. Like every time I see Eric, it's the same guy, like over and over and over again. There isn't different versions of you. So what you see is what you get. And I think ultimately we should all live by that drum. There's only one version of us. That's what others see in, perpetuity out there into the marketplace. So I find that to be easier said than done, but ultimately that's the best way that we should all live our lives. Just standing out to me what you're saying.
Well, it's interesting though. Adam Hergenrother, who I work with, on a intimate, ongoing basis, right? As from a Libyan standpoint, I mean, Adam asked this question that is, what do you love about yourself so much that causes you to hurt others?
Mm.
What do you love about yourself so much that causes you to hurt others? And usually the thing I tell people is whatever pops in your head first is probably the right answer. Everything else is what you rationalize and try to justify and come up with later. And for me, the first time he asked me that question, the first thing that popped in my head was my identity.
Mm.
Right? Is like who I see myself as when either my own behavior or the behaviors of others around me threatens that identity. Is typically when I'm not the best version of me. And not the best version of me could be, any variation of I'm agitated, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm
Sure.
mad, I'm angry, sad, whatever it is, right? But the worst version of me typically is when my identity is threatened from a perception standpoint. And so identity plays just this really critical role into so much of what we do, that could be so hard for people to separate self from a desire for people to have a perceived identity. That's it's been an interesting awareness for me, at least over the past few years, to try to understand.
Yeah. So to advise anybody out there that's dealing with that similarity, Eric, how do you do it? I mean, how do you deal with it?
Have, have
On the
awareness.
spot right there.
Yeah, I think it starts with the framework of awareness, right? It's like really understanding is like what at the root of the frustration, the annoyance, the agitation is the actual cause of it. What can you peel back and go deeper on to actually truly get to? And what you eventually get to, at least for me, is what I eventually get to is something like. Is that I will show, like an example would be is that used to really agitate me would be that I won't show up like a leader. And my identity was that I show up like a leader everywhere I go. So if I was late or if something would cause me to be unprepared or if something outside of my control would impact the potential perception of whether Eric shows up as a leader, that would then cause me to have agitation, frustration, anger, whatever.
Wow.
Having the awareness what actually was triggering that frustration was the fact that I wasn't going to show up with integrity to myself.
Wow.
In the eyes of the people I made commitments to was what is the actual root underlying cause of the frustration. When I eventually have that awareness, then it becomes easier to kind of talk through and talk to yourself about to begin to make rational sense of the actual frustration itself. But the best answer I got in the shortest way is practice having awareness.
Yeah, I love it. Self-awareness is huge, and everybody needs to work on that. It doesn't matter how involved you are that way. No, I love this, man. So let's keep going down the road through the different factors, because this is incredible. Kind of diving deep into this and the correlation.
Yeah. So from a weight loss and from a sales standpoint, from a business standpoint, intrinsic motivation was one of the consistently mentioned items with successful weight loss and weight loss that was sustained longer than 3 years. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, this is one that's really difficult, right? It's because what you need is the person that you're working with to have intrinsic motivation. And the key word is intrinsic, because funny enough, extrinsic motivation does not actually show up as one of the consistently mentioned or even the often mentioned items that cause people to lose and sustain their weight loss.
Wow.
So knowing that extrinsic motivation is not highly correlated to sustained results, to me is really key in understanding that someone has to be driven to want to get an outcome or to want to show up a certain way or to want to provide a level of service or a result or to benefit a consumer or a group, but giving them more money, dangling incentives, dangling these like, don't they understand they could just make more money? Or don't they realize if they just showed up and did XYZ, they would get ABC? Sustainably, that doesn't show up from a behavior standpoint consistently or often. The only thing that does from a motivation standpoint is intrinsic motivation. So how do you help foster intrinsic motivation for someone else? That becomes the difficult part. That's the like leadership ninja hack.
So that brings up that question. So what's the answer to that, Eric? I mean, obviously you've been a leader and been doing this for a long time. What is it? I mean, from your perspective.
So I mean, the only thing I can give you is my theory, just because I'm not sure if there's a way to measure whether it's successful over scale or not. But what I know is that Harvard did a large scale research project on what causes people to be most fulfilled at work, and the first most commonly reported item was progress. The second most commonly reported item was doing meaningful work. And so one of the things that I try to do is to tell stories, to give examples, to create visual reminders about all the meaningful work that we do day to day.
Wow.
Because the fear that I always have is that people in the organization will treat real estate like another transaction. And, the thing I always say, Greg, is that God forbid when you go to have, open heart surgery, that your cardiologist treats it like just another surgery, because to you, it's the only heart surgery that ever matters. Right. And you just hope that your cardiologist doesn't treat it like another routine procedure. And so what I want to make sure that our salespeople never do is fall into that trap of losing sight of the fact that the work they do is meaningful, and the work they do changes the trajectory of someone else's life. And if you can't get excited and get out of bed to go change someone's life, you need to start looking for another job. Like, go to a different industry, go find something other to do. There are plenty of other ways. I'm sure that you can go not make the world a better place. But if you're not interested in making a difference in someone's life, by understanding how real estate is more than just the wealth, it is so much more than just the house itself. If you don't get that, then this is the wrong industry. But it's my job as a leader to remind them so that they maintain that intrinsic motivation around why they do meaningful work.
I love that. And again, breaking it down based off of if you're not wholeheartedly in it and you're not satisfied and truly passionate about what you do, you should leave. And that goes across any industry. If you're just doing it to check a box and do that, you're never going to be the best version of yourself. You're not going to make impacts. And quite frankly, that to me sounds like a prison in a way. Why are you putting yourself in that? You're not a tree. Pick up and leave, move. I just I don't quite understand that. I know that there's comfort into certain people, and some people are just gluttons for punishment. I mean, maybe they just like to do it. It was interesting. This is an offshoot kind of story, and I don't even know the gentleman's name. So I had my driveway kind of extended, and it was some asphalt. And so the builder calls me up and says, hey, asphalt's going to get extended. The guy's going to come out. Great. So I'm very personable. I always greet everybody, ask them if they need something to drink, eat, whatever, snacks. So I go out there. This was the most miserable man I've ever met in my life. I mean, he hated what he was doing. He's been laying asphalt for God knows how long. And anybody that meets me, I'm one of the nicer guys out there, I suppose. I'm very positive and happy-go-lucky. And I literally just said, hey, how's it going? Oh, life. Like, all right. And then I start talking to him. It's very short in response. I said, okay, if you need anything, let me know. I'll be inside. I mean, to me, it's, why are you doing that? Why are you that type of person that's projecting a life that way and putting that on somebody else? Look, if you want to bring that internal, that's one thing. But then putting somebody else into your perspective or dragging down somebody, I know the adage is misery loves company, but it's bizarre to me. Didn't mean to go off on left field there, Eric, but it just stood out to me as you mentioned. If you're not happy, get out. Do something that makes you happy.
Yeah, there absolutely are other options, right? And that goes back to that intrinsic motivation piece, which is if you're not motivated intrinsically about the work that you do, go find work that you are motivated about, because eventually you'll make more money anyway, because eventually you'll give the world more value because you care about the result. And so I think that there's a big disconnect in that. One of the other things, as you look at, there basically is one additional consistently mentioned item that is a positive. So something that you want to have in the environment to get results. And those were self-defined goals. That the most consistently mentioned items of people who sustained weight loss after 3 years was self-defined goals. And so in the weight loss spectrum, it was clear activity goals, clear eating goals, constantly reassessing your goals, and then having them be personal, and then having them be prioritized. Right? So it's basically like, what activities am I going to do? What am I going to eat? Am I on track to do the things I said that I want to do? And does it mean something to me? Well, funny enough, there's a pretty easy correlation and translation to the sales world as well about what we do, right? It's like, I remember I had an agent one time who, at this phase in my career, we used to like ask everyone to make sales calls and to make outbound calls, and she just wouldn't. She might make like 3 today, 5 tomorrow, 0 on Monday, and she would barely make some, but she hated it. If the phone rang, she'd rather avoid it than answer it, and we loved her as a company. And so one day I went to her and I just said, "Hey, what if I never ask you to make another call ever again?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, is that real? Could you act like, are you joking, or you mean that?" Wow. Well, you're not doing it now, so why don't I just give you permission to do exactly what you're not doing anyway? And just the relief over her face that I no longer was going to hold her responsible to do something she wasn't doing anyway. And she said, "Well, what would I do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. How about you go do the things that you love doing and enjoy, and where they actually cause you to generate business? Like, go to events, like become a socialite. Everywhere you go socially, people talk to you, and they just so happen to refer you business or do business with you. So why don't you just go do more events? Why don't you just go to the places that you want to go to and talk to more people while you're there? Because that seems to be more effective than avoiding the phone." And so she got these exponential results as a byproduct of giving her permission to have highly personalized activity goals, and then build her results plan based on something that was personalized to her from an activity standpoint, that then rolls up to the result goals that she wanted, which was she wanted to sell X number of houses and make Y amount of money. And she could go to events, go to NBA games, go to, whatever it was, in order to meet more people. But if it's not personalized, if it's not prioritized, reassessed, and mapped out to what you're passionate about, it's not sustainable. You wouldn't want to eat broccoli and chicken and rice for the next 3 years. Your odds of sustaining the weight loss would be like slim to none. Yeah. Right? And so it has to be something that's manageable, that you can sustain in perpetuity, because you want to have a great career, not a great year.
That, to me, it stands out in the adage of going back to the health standpoint, the diets, right? Diets to most people seem temporary. And as you envisioned the grilled chicken and, broccoli sort of scenario, you've got to build something that is long-term in sustainability. It's not a destination so much as the journey that it comes through your health. I mean, there's goals that can be, projected out that way. But I want to ask you this, when it comes down to it, Eric, because I think that this is important for everybody to know. Obviously, especially if you're a leader and you have an organization or a team that you're looking for, is this something that you recommend first and foremost that everybody does individually with their team? And then secondarily, do you have periodic timeframes to say, "Hey, Greg, I had this conversation with you 3 months ago or 6 months ago. Let's reevaluate your goals. Did you change? Can we adjust?" Like, let's go over that exercise just a little bit for everybody for takeaway.
Yeah, I love that. So here's at least the cadence for us, which is that that's every day. People check in with their commitment, as in, I'm committed to do this activity today. Tomorrow, I'll report on whether I did what I said I was committed to yesterday or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll reestablish a new commitment for what will be tomorrow when I get on the meeting tomorrow. As a leader, I put very little emphasis and focus and time and energy on that, whether you did yesterday what you said you were going to do. I'm more interested in, did you make a commitment than I am, did you follow through on the commitment? And I only say that is because I don't expect perfection. And I don't always do everything that I say I will do every single day because life. And so what's more important is making a declaration of commitment, making it publicly, and then winning more days than I lose. So I've got that habit baked into our routine and our cadence from a stand-up standpoint. And then weekly, everyone in the organization has a one-on-one where we would then review the goals that you set out, plus the commitments that you made and the results. So your goals, your actuals, and then your results. Your goals, your actual, and your plan. This year I said I was going to sell, I'm just making this up, 50 widgets. My actual is I've sold 30. And my plan to sell the last 20 is whatever it is. Ideally, we review that on a weekly basis. In my world, I like to start with reviewing their personal goals. So what I want to know is, you said that you were going to go on vacation 4 times this year. Greg, you've been on vacation twice. When are you planning to schedule your 3rd vacation, and where will it be?
Wow.
Because I want to be as invested in holding them accountable to their personal goals as I am to their professional goals, arguably more invested in their personal goals than their professional goals. Because when they win as a person, they win as a professional. And so I want those two things to be hand in hand, right? And especially from a sustainability standpoint. And then quarterly, semi-annually, and annually, we reassess as a larger group. This is what you said you wanted. This is the actual. What grade would you give yourself? What are you going to change in the next 90 days to get more in alignment to what you said you wanted? Or do you even still want those things? Should we make new goals and throw the old ones out and reassess that as a group? So we actually just did that last week as a group. People stand up, they go, I said I was going to do this. I did this minus whatever, or I did it plus. I did it better than, or less than, or equal to. And then they go back and they give themselves a grade. And funny enough, everyone I've ever worked with always gives themselves a lower grade than the rest of the group does. And which is kind of a neat, interesting experience, is to show that really we're all a lot harder on ourselves than the collective is. And so that's usually a good experience. And we do that every 90 days to 180 days. And then we post those visuals in the office. So right, to the left of my monitor, I can see mine, and those stay there so that I have a relationship visually with the goals, or if I need to make changes with them.
I think, to me, developing that blueprint is crucially important, and not everybody has the good fortune of being aligned with leadership or mentorship or even just that camaraderie to hold one another accountable, to really go over goals. I think that ultimately everyone as an entrepreneur has to be self-starting, self-motivating to a certain degree. Otherwise you would go work for somebody else if that wasn't the case. Target audience in here who we're speaking to is real estate professionals. So I think that ultimately that resonates. I love the fact that you were talking about holistic nature into that, Eric, and that is a testament to your leadership and guidance that way, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, showing up as a good person and a human and balancing that life outside of the office and production is crucially important. And you look at it from that degree, I think it's massively effective for sure. And it shows you care. I mean, that's a big thing.
And for me, Greg, is I love to work, and I don't ever want somebody to work as much as I do. I work, I work by choice.
Right.
Some days I work because I have to, but most days I work by choice, and that's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't ever want somebody to I don't ever want somebody to live my life because they think that they're part of the organization, and that's an expectation. And so I want to make sure that they're getting what they want from their life, because my job as a leader is to leave them in a better place than I found them.
Wow.
Hopefully they don't leave, or I don't leave them. But if that day, when that day comes, I still have to do my duty, and that's to leave them better than I found them. And
Beautiful.
and that includes the personal component.
Yeah. And as you said, stated higher, almost higher than the business side of it. And again, I think that's a massive, testament there. So did we cover the main factors, kind of the weight loss and, correlation to real estate and entrepreneurialism? So Eric, do you mind giving a recap? I mean, just everybody out there tuning in all the way through and through, what are the kind of the main blueprint takeaways, just as that recap?
Yep. So self-monitoring, external monitoring, encouraging experiences, intrinsic motivation, self-defined goals. So, there's kind of those 5 larger buckets or categories within them. I think there are some that are maybe a little bit more important or granular. I love the idea of having like a failure plan. I love having visual reminders. There's a lot of ways to do it. There's T-shirts, there's pens, there's bumper stickers, there's Post-it notes, there's visuals on whiteboards and on walls. And there's a lot of ways to remind yourself about what's important, because life is noisy. And then I love the idea of having personal goals and mapping out activities to personal goals. So if I'm a leader, those are the things I'm going back and I'm instilling into the organization, is ensuring that I've got at least something in the regular cadence of the organization that covers all of those buckets of behavior that's sustainable and successful over a long period of time. And then there were the 3 things to avoid. And those were intrinsic challenges that are out of your control. Divorce and death were the 2 most causes for why someone would potentially gain back the weight, or that they would fall off of an exercise or diet protocol. None of us plan for divorce or death. And so that's a wild card, right? That is really difficult. The extrinsic challenges are things like holidays and celebrations and stress. The good news is Christmas shows up at the same time every year. I think so does New Year's. So we know for the most part that we can plan ahead for holidays by having a defined failure plan.
Wow.
And then the last one that I thought was really interesting, that is a great reminder as a leader to avoid, which is criticism. The fear of failure and criticism are the 2 common discouraging experiences that cause someone to gain back the weight that they lost. And so as a leader, as a spouse, as a friend, it's our job to ensure that we're not bringing criticism, that we're not bringing pressure, that we're not making life more difficult than it is already, and that we're celebrating failure so that there isn't a fear of failure, but there is actually seeing failure as a positive, because it's a correlation to success.
Wow. And I think I want to save that thought or topic for another episode, and completely, because I think that so many times that comes up in conversation is to people are looking for the perfect path or blueprint, and they're not necessarily wanting to stub their toe or stumble, but the most successful people on the planet failed way more than they succeeded. Now, I don't know if this is, kind of a factual statement or not. So the fact checkers out there, if you're going to come on me, I apologize that way. But have you heard the story of WD-40 and how they got their name? Does that ring a bell to you?
No.
And so again, don't hold this to me. I don't know if this is true. I should look this up, but I was talking to somebody the other day and it came out. I thought it was pretty clever. WD-40 was named because they failed 39 times before they got to 40. So again, don't hold me to it. I don't know if that's actually
what the Google machines. That's what WD-40's website says. So there you go.
There you go. So the point is that I think that the success and failure conversation, we need to dissect that, Eric, on disruptance for sure, because I think that's a powerful one. But yeah, any other thoughts or diving deep into this before we wrap this one up, my friend?
No, but we can't talk about success and failure without talking about Dyson. That'll have to be part of the next conversation. I mean, there's nobody who failed more than Dyson. And Colonel Sanders. So we can bring that to the party for the next one.
Dyson, Colonel Sanders, WD-40. You guys know what's coming at you next on Disruptance. Eric, honor, pleasure, my friend. Always a blast. We'll definitely talk on the next one.
Thanks, buddy.